So we had amazing speakers. Chris, for example, Chris is one of my early mentors. He taught me a lot. He believed in me when no one else did. And from him, I pretty much learned about how the company can be built in a remote fashion. Right now, he has about 100 employees, all remote. An amazing company, and he provides a solution for content distribution for e-commerce businesses and other types of businesses where you can drive a lot of free organic targeted traffic to your store and you can increase your sales. So not just thinking from the perspective of like paid advertising on Facebook ads, it's thinking creatively. How do you know what type of searches your clients are looking for, your customers are looking for, and how do you get your website to show up for those? So it's a very creative solution that they have developed, and they can drive a lot of organic traffic this way. So he explained this whole model and it was mind-blowing.
All right, so I shall be talking about how we quietly generated millions in sales from 110 pieces of content. This doesn't use social media, this doesn't use ads, and so it's quite different to how you guys would typically approach e-com. And I'm going to split this into two parts. Okay, so in the beginning I'm going to talk a little bit about the philosophy that I have around this method, around my business, right, which kind of then sets the stage for the method. Okay, so I won't go straight into the details, but I think you'll like it this way. So my name is Chris Munch. I run a company called AmpiFire. So a few little details about me so you know who I am. So I've been doing this since around 2006. My first business was something kind of like the idea of Netflix, but for free. It was getting a few 100,000 visitors a month, but I couldn't get funding. And so that failed. I lost some money in that. And so I started blogging to make money. I was paid like maybe $3 an hour as a blogger. And I started doing that myself and built it into a six-figure business within a couple of years by doing my own sites. And that got me into building software. And so I've now have a software company which we built with zero funding to 8 figures, generated millions in sales online, and I've done this while traveling the world, raising 3 kids, and being unknown, not having Instagram or doing any of this social media stuff. I live in an island in the Mediterranean, and essentially helped a lot of businesses grow. And so the philosophy in our business, kind of what we're about, is we want to help the little guy. We're fighting for the little guy, the small business. We don't work with Fortune 500 companies. We won't take them on, and so we focus very much on the small business. And since 2007, I've been publishing what you'd probably consider to be very boring content, right? And this has quietly generated a shit ton of traffic and a lot of sales in all sorts of different niches. And it's like an updated version of what I was doing like over 10, 12 years ago. And so this is one of the little sites I had, a little handbag site. And we generated millions in dollars in sales. Unfortunately, we did that for Amazon and eBay, so you only get a tiny commission, right? But essentially, I learned how to drive traffic. And so today, we do this in a more automated, more systemized way. We have writers and technology and platform and AI, which helps all this stuff. And so essentially, we produce content as audio, as videos, as news articles, as blog posts, and we publish that across hundreds of sites in one blast. I'm also the godfather to Alex's son, who's not here right now. And so, you know, Alex trusted me with that, and so it's a great honor. And let's dig into the philosophy here. And so, you know, a question. So I'm a person that asks a lot of whys, right? So, you know, when you think about your customers, your clients, it's like, why do they do what they do? And it's like, why do you do what you do? So, you know, I think a lot about why I got into business in the first place, what I was aiming to do, because often you go in with an intent, but you can get distracted, right? So I invite you just to kind of think for a second why you got into business in the first place. And so, you know, I think many of us wanted that internet lifestyle, right? And so, you know, back before it was kind of a thing, I was traveling around. I was traveling with a couple of kids. I was doing this since about 2008, once I made a bit of money. And this is the sort of thing which you see, you know, people on the beach, traveling the world, you know, laptop lifestyle. But it's not really the reality, right? the reality for most people is some kind of level of high stress, exhaustion, and overwhelm. So traveling at the time with 2 kids at the time, trying to run a business, jumping on loads and loads of different flights all over, just became very, very exhausting for me. And so this is me in Hong Kong. So I was setting up a company in Hong Kong, suffering pretty bad from jet lag, getting sick from the food. I think like the next day I was in bed for a day with food poisoning, and like I came home after, I was also at an event, pretty exhausted. Kids wanted to play, you know, I just want to sleep. And this was tough, and I was beginning just not to feel myself and just burning out, right? And you know, what do we tell ourselves in those situations as well? You know, you just have to work harder. We're hit with this, essentially this motivation porn, this stuff on Instagram all day long, like you have to work hard, there's all these things you should be doing, just push it, and just push it. But everybody has limits, right? And so you're seeing this stuff every single day, and some days you just don't feel that in your body. You know, like you wake up, maybe you partied too hard last night, and it's like you don't feel like coming into the event. You need to rest or something. But like every day, it's just work harder, do this, do more, keep pushing. And you know, I work hard. I was putting in a lot of hours. My business was growing, but something was wrong, right? And shortly after, I got like my hormone levels tested, got my cortisol tested. And it turned out, and I think I was maybe 27, 28 at the time, that my cortisol was just like flatlining. So my adrenals were unable to make enough cortisol. So in the morning I would wake up extremely tired, right? And it was on the level where they would have to give me injections to have like synthetic cortisol, something like this. And I was like, this is a bit fucked up. It's like I'm in my late 20s. I shouldn't be this exhausted. You know, and so sometimes we can push ourselves too hard, right? So this is Conor McGregor, right? I like MMA. I do jiu-jitsu as a bit of a hobby. And, you know, this guy is a beast, and he trains ridiculously hard. He works ridiculously hard. And he went into a fight with a damaged leg, and you can see he ended up breaking his leg. So sometimes we can push it too hard. Sometimes this message of just push and push and push just might not be the right thing. And of course, hard work is mandatory, but maybe we can avoid breaking a leg. And, you know, in traveling the world, meeting hundreds of successful people, one thing I began to notice is that a lot of successful people, right, they're kind of a little bit mentally ill. They have some kind of underlying trauma, and often behind the facade that they present is they're actually very, very unhappy. You know, and I say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek because, you know, everyone's got issues, but when you're presented with this kind of Instagram version of the world, and you go to events and everyone's showing their success, but they don't really talk about the dark side, right, and the difficulties that they go through, which is, you know, I really appreciated Powell's talk yesterday where he talks about his struggles and the pain that you go through to achieve things, right? And, you know, a lot of people, like when you have the entrepreneur mindset, there's this kind of dark side to it where you kind of like needing followers and success and power to feel worthy, right? And that just being yourself, right, just doesn't feel enough, that you always have to push and achieve more, right? And so there's all this kind of overcompensation, right, of, you know, trying to display wealth or success or intelligence or something. And it gives people a high anxiety because you're always pushing and you can't quite get to where you need, because there's always something more, there's always someone better, there's always something that you could have done better, right? And you're always going to hit failures and challenges at some point. And people don't talk about this, right? Or very few people do, right? So not everyone is as honest as, say, Tim Ferriss, right? So Tim Ferriss, on his site, he talks about a suicide attempt that he had, right, when he was younger. And so among all of this kind of motivation porn to do better, to work harder, beneath that, it's not really sharing the reality and sharing the truth, Okay, and so I started to rethink things a little bit because it wasn't really working out exactly as I had planned. And I didn't start a business to be completely burned out and overwhelmed and plugged into my phone and the internet and Slack and messages, right? Because it's not healthy for you. You're not designed to live like that. And so I started to ask different questions, like how can we get amazing results? How can we achieve great things, but without sacrificing our life? Because we only have one life, right? And if you think about it, like, there's only so many years left, right, in your life, and only so many opportunities to do certain things. So, for example, my parents, they wanted me to come out to the US to bring the grandkids to go to Disney, right? It wasn't something that I personally really wanted to do. I've got work going on, but it's like, how many chances might I have in the future to do that again with my parents, to celebrate that sort of thing? It's like they might have 1 year left, 5 years, 10. And if they have 20 or 30, great, but it's still only 20 or 30 times that we might take a vacation. So there's not many left. And so sometimes you get so caught up in the day-to-day that you forget the limited opportunities that we have. And so I approach business with a bit of a different philosophy, not really about working as hard as I can, but getting the most out of it. So, I've wanted to have the freedom to not have the pressure of needing to be a perfect influencer to make sales, right? To not have to present myself in some kind of way where I have this massive success, or I'm super fit or healthy or whatever it might be, to kind of sell my product, right? And I don't want to be tied to my business every day. I want to have the option to be invisible, right? That I can step back from the business and that I can just make sales from providing real value, that the product can sell itself. Often we are shown so many personal brands that are very successful, and we remember them really well because we do connect with people, but there's just as many, if not many, many more brands which aren't connected to one central person, which are extremely successful. So you don't have to do it that way. I didn't want to rely on tricks or hypes or gimmicks to make sales. And I wanted to live a simple life, right? Just based on simple values, right? That would lead to a more happy life. And just to provide something of value that helped people. And so it is possible to have a great level of success and still choose to do less. And as proof of that, this is my current calendar. So at the moment, I'm on a 3-month sabbatical from work. So I run a company, 100 people, but I've been able to take 3 months off. Apart from coming here to this event, that's because I wanted to hang out with Alex, right? And so in the past 3 months, I've done a 2-hour meeting once a month with my team, and I check in every 2 weeks for about 1 to 2 hours. And so after I leave this event, I won't be doing anything until the beginning of October, which will lead me to the end of my sabbatical. And I announced this sabbatical to my team by saying, hey, anyone who's been with the company for 7 years is allowed 3 months off, paid, and great, I've been here for 15 years, so I'll see you in 3 months. And nobody else really qualifies apart from one guy, so it's all good. So I'm going to talk now about 3 ways that you can get more from your business with less. Just 3 ideas, which you've probably heard of already, right? So number 1 is the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, right? We've all heard about this, but doing it in practice is very, very difficult. So you have to be relentless with picking your priorities and what's the most important thing to work on, right? And if you do that, it is going to allow you to work a lot less. Okay, and you can do this throughout your entire company and train your team to do it. Number 2 is to avoid competition, right? If you have competition, you're going to have to work harder, and you start to enter some kind of zero-sum game where it's the person who works the hardest who's the person who's going to win, right? So, for example, in sports, right? So like in MMA, like you said, they're at a level, Powell, where they're all doing the same thing, following the same rules, and the differences between people is very little. So they have to outwork each other, right? And that's not a nice game to be playing because it's extremely difficult to do. And so if you can avoid competition and think of a way to differentiate yourself and to have a product that's truly different, right, then things are going to be a lot easier for you. And number 3 is be boring, right? And so being boring helps because if you're boring and people don't really notice what you're doing, you're going to have less competition, right? And so it kind of allows you to be in the background and just live your life, run your business, right, without having people run in and copy you. And it's also about not just following kind of what's trendy or what's hot right now, but just doing something that works. And the stuff that works is usually pretty boring. And so that brings me to part 2, which is the method. So since about 2014, I've been using those 3 rules to grow my business, but also other people's businesses with boring content. And we've systemized and semi-automated this process with AmpiFire. So, following the 2080 rule, we've got it down to about 3 to 4 hours now where we'll be able to set up and plan and then automate for that business an entire content marketing campaign for an entire year, right, in just 4 hours. So it's like 4 hours, and then you get a year's worth of essentially work and results. And so we're helping small businesses get exposure with content. We've got a team all around the world. Some stuff has been written about us, and we do this by putting out audio, videos, news articles, blog posts, social media, slideshows, infographics, nothing fancy, nothing that looks amazing or reads amazing, but stuff that works. And so a question for you, right? What is the #1 website in the world? So you say TikTok? I heard. I like this guy. So Google, right? And so it depends how you measure it, right? I guess if you measure it by people watching mindless videos, it could be TikTok. But in terms of traffic, at least from this site, then Google is bigger than YouTube and Facebook combined, right? This is a little bit old, so TikTok would be on here. Obviously, porn is pretty popular as well, you'll see, right? But Google, whether it's #1 or #2, it's massive. But what's crazier, right, is that Google is the website that drives more sales than any other platform. And that is why businesses spend more on Google than any other platform. So, in here we talk a lot about Facebook, TikTok, social media, but they don't come close to the amount of spend and the amount of sales that come from Google. And so, trick question, what is Amazon's biggest source of traffic? And any takers? Google, right? And so search, right? So most people go direct to Amazon because they have a big brand, but 27% comes from search and not even 5% from social. eBay, an even higher percent from search. Walmart, an even higher percent from search. And so Google is the biggest source of buyer traffic out there. And so what surprises me in e-com is why it's talked about so little and why so few people do it, because it works really, really well. And so I don't know, maybe you guys hate money or something, but Google is extremely effective at driving sales, but it's a very different process, and it is a bit boring, and it's not so cool, right? And the problem's actually bigger than you realize, okay? Because think about it. After seeing your ad on Facebook or on YouTube, right, or on TikTok, what do people do? They Google it. They look it up, right? And most people, they don't just buy, right? We saw this yesterday, so I love that, so I stole it, right? As good marketers always do. And so they go in this kind of loop of like exploring the alternative products, evaluating. The first thing I do if I see an ad on YouTube is I go look for the product cheaper or a better version from somewhere else, right? Because I don't trust the ad that I see on YouTube because I've been around marketers too much, so I'm sure they're not giving me a good deal. And this is the reality, right? 81% of shoppers research their product before purchasing. So you at least you're losing 80% of people, right? At least a huge chunk, minimal 15 to 30% of your ad spend is disappearing if you can't bring those people back into your funnel, right? And so the question is when people search for your product or about your product and what it does, are you presenting them with content? Are they able to find you? And if not, you're going to get a lot lower conversions, right? And so your ROI is going to be worse and you're going to get less traffic. And so if you want a better ROI and you want to stop burning money, and even worse, sending that traffic to your competitors, because if you're not showing up, guess who is? Your competitor, right? They're showing up. So when they go and search for a product, your brand or someone else like it, and you're not there, then they end up going to another company. In fact, we do this a lot. We like to kind of steal the traffic from people running YouTube ads or Facebook ads. We see that they haven't put any content out there, and we'll essentially hijack their traffic. And so, if you imagine, someone who's seen your ad, they're busy, right? They see it on their phone. They haven't quite absorbed it properly because they're distracted with their day-to-day life. If they remember the name of your product, if they remember it because they might be coming back the next day or an hour later or 5 minutes later, or they just forget, if they remember, they might search for your brand. And when they search for your brand, it might be nothing there, it might be something bad, or it just doesn't look good and it doesn't make them feel like they should buy the product, or maybe it's a competitor. Or they start doing research, right? And so they might remember that, hey, you said you had this ingredient and it had this benefit, but they couldn't quite remember the name of what it was. And so they type in some weird search like aloe vera face cream without this weird ingredient, but yet you're nowhere to be seen, right? And so still nothing. And the reality is that people will already be doing usually this type of research anyway, right? So, people might be wondering what dangerous chemicals are in cream, and they might see that there's this ingredient, this quaternium 15, which isn't good for you. And so they think, well, I don't want that in my product, right? And so they start searching, well, I want an aloe vera cream without this. But there isn't here any single product listed that answers that query specifically, okay? And so this is general, it's just a aloe vera cream. This is just talking about the actual chemical. And so what we find so often is that for all these different topics, and there's literally thousands of them for all sorts of different products, is Google doesn't have anything to show. And so it's doing the best that it can by showing something that's kind of relevant, but not really the answer. And so has anyone searched for something online and not really found what they're looking for, right? It happens all the time. And so there's just many, many of these searches where there's just nothing out there. And so the average product, and I've not really come across a product where you can't do this, there's often just thousands of topics and angles that you can talk about, and a lot of them, in fact, the majority of them have not been covered. And just to kind of demonstrate this as well, is every single day, 15% of the searches made in Google are brand new. They've never even been done before. They won't show up in any research tool or anything. And so the way that we approach this, it's part data-driven, but it's also part common sense. We understand what our users might be thinking. And this is all about going after the long tail, right? And the way that we do this is we target such specific terms that we show up and people find us. And the volume is low, but when you do this a lot, it stacks up. And so, you could have a think about the product that you have and some of the different features and things, right? And so you could think about the different colors, because people will look for the different colors, they'll look for the different ingredients, they'll look for the different materials, they'll look for what it doesn't contain, they'll look for the specific sizes, right? They'll look for, like people will say for over 50s, or for women, right? Or for kids, okay? They look for very, very specific things, problems that it solves, right? Even comparing to other products, right? If it sells or ships within a certain location, there's so many things out there. And so there's such a massive opportunity within your niche, within your industry for your product, where most of this stuff that people are searching for, right, it's hidden, right? Other marketers don't really do this research. A lot of this stuff you can't get from tools. And so there's all this opportunity to connect with your audience, right, when they're looking so specifically for what they want, that if you present an article, even if it's boring and poorly written, the fact that it says, we have exactly what you are looking for, they're going to buy because it's exactly what they want. And so by publishing content, you have a new source of high converting traffic, and this essentially will increase your conversions, okay? Because when people go to research your product, they find what they're looking for, and you can actually automate this process, right? You can once you've got your plan, you can essentially outsource it. But there's obviously some challenges because you have to figure out how to be present and how to rank in Google, okay? And so the first question is, well, what does Google want? What's Google's mission? So Google wants to show you the most accurate, trustworthy, and relevant result. And guess what? That's probably not from your website, because Google has a big preference for brands. And so this was back in 2016, a study was done, and it showed that the vast majority, something like 70 to 80% of the front page results were owned by just a handful of media companies. It's the companies that have their essentially 8 and 9 figure brands, right? They've got millions upon millions of visitors, and that's probably not your site. And so behind most searches are billionaire brands. And if your budget is not 7 to 8 figures, right, to do SEO, to build up your brand, right, then you're not going to be able to compete with these. Because, you know, there's big companies out there spending a shit ton of money to be present in Google, hiring the best marketers, the best SEOs, right, the best traffic specialists to do this. So the question is, well, how can you compete, right? And there's two things that you need to do. And so one I touched on before, which is being unique, finding that unique topic or those unique opportunities that you can talk about, right? So like the giraffe finds its place in the world because it's got a long neck and it can reach the taller trees. With the content that you produce, if you've done something that nobody else has, you're almost forcing Google's hand to give exposure to that content when they search for it. And it's kind of similar to the method which is used by many billionaires, right? So Steve Jobs is known for Apple, but this is how he started, right? It was making this weird machine which didn't really do much other than kind of like print out something which would look like a receipt, and maybe you could do some math sums on it or something. It wasn't fun. And it was only for people who subscribed to a magazine in Palo Alto. And so it was very, very, very specific. And from there, he grew and put it in a store. And then eventually, you know, we know how the story goes. And so you can do the same thing when you put out this specific content, right? That actually is a stepping stone for you to gradually reach bigger audiences. And as you do this more and more, you actually get more and more exposure for your site. And so it stacks. And the second way to approach this is you publish on big sites. There's some big sites which you can publish on for free, you know, like YouTube, and there's some sites which you might have to pay to get access to. But if you can publish on these big sites, then Google already trusts them, and so is much more likely to give you this exposure. And, you know, so like I said, the average product often has thousands of topics that have never been seen, and if you're the only one putting out that content, publishing content on those topics, so you're one of very few people doing it, and you put it on a big site, then essentially Google is almost obliged, right, to give you that exposure. So something that we specialize in doing is both publishing to these big sites in a way that's, you know, cost efficient, and also finding these hidden opportunities. So I'll give you an example, and this is how we quietly generated millions in sales from approximately 110 pieces of content, okay? Now we do this in all sorts of niches, not just e-com, but I've got an e-com example here. And so this is a device called Air Physio. So it's a lung cleaning device. It's a big market. It's part of, you know, a $50 billion market. And it's very, very competitive. And the client in this case they're not the actual company, right? So it's even worse because they're a reseller. So they're one of many resellers selling the same product. So they don't even have a unique product, but they managed to do very well. And so they managed to rank in the end, and I think this took maybe 6 months to a year, to rank on the front page, I think in the 3rd position, just below Amazon, because Amazon is pretty tough to beat. And so they're in the 3rd position with their store, ranking for the product name, okay? So that's pretty good, but to get on page 1 for a main product term is very difficult. It doesn't always happen. And so your best bet, and the way to actually get there as well, is to start with being very specific, because that's finding these hidden angles. So, they started producing content which was more specific. And so, for example, on a lung cleaning device. And so the content we have here, so this one was from us, this is their website, and this is a different website, just a news site which picked up the content that we put out, okay? And so individually, just the website that picked up this content is getting traffic and driving sales, and it's very targeted content, okay? And they would do more of this, so like bronchitis OPEP device. I don't even know what that means, but because it's less competitive, and they're one of the few sites or few pieces of content on this topic, and it's on a big site, is in Google, it's showing up here as a featured snippet, okay? And one reason that Jeff Bezos is so rich is he does this exact same model with Amazon, okay? And so if you look at how many pages Amazon has in Google, right? This says 29 million. I see variations of this number depending on what day you look, but it's in the tens of millions, potentially like even over 100 million, right? Pages that are on Amazon.com. And what you see when you search for something like Xbox One USB headset, there's 4,000 pages, right? 4,000 individual listings that come up. Ultimately, a USB headset, they all work with Xbox, they all work with a PlayStation, they all work on Zoom, but people search for them in these very specific ways, right? And you can see that the sellers, they optimize for this. So you can see here that they're a headset for Xbox Series X, for Xbox One, for Windows 10 PCs, right? So they're adding all these very specific things so that they have a chance of showing up in Amazon. So people are doing this optimization within Amazon itself, but they don't do this optimization really for Google. And so Amazon is packed with sellers that have done all of this optimization, all of this very focused keyword research, right? But when you sell a product and you have a product page, you can only really do this once. But if you publish content on other sites, you can do it as many times as you want to. And so then you can cover all of these different topics. If you were selling, for example, a USB headset, you could talk about all the different colors that you might have. You could talk about the various features. You could talk about, if it's for Xbox One or for a laptop or for an Android tablet, stuff that you couldn't really fit into one single headline, you can do across multiple articles. And you can get some of this data from Amazon, you can get some of this data from Google when you see related searches, right? So we know that people are searching for oxybenzone-free sunscreen or creams, right? That they're searching for creams that are for over 50s, or for in the UK, or for in the USA, or for mature skin. All of these very specific things which people want. And so the way that we come up with literally hundreds of topics very quickly, this is a simplified version of what we do. We have some software which does this in a more intense way, but we take some ideas of like maybe who the audience is, how you could describe the product, right? So face cream, eye cream, moisturizer, the benefits, so say it removes wrinkles, organic, and so on, and then some other kind of unique, specific, what we call qualifiers, such as it not containing a certain ingredient, being in the USA or a certain state, or dermatologist recommended. And if you just mix any one of these 4 blocks either side, you come up with an article title. So here you have Best 2022 Eye Cream for over 50s for plumping face. So you have one article topic. And then over here, you do the same thing, just again picking randomly any one of these boxes. You've got oxybenzone-free body lotion for sunburn that is organic. So 2 completely different things for the same product, right? And so we do this and we generate literally hundreds, if not thousands of topics coming up with some of these ideas. And so it's the same thing which we did for this Air Physio lung cleaning device. So here's another angle, an emphysema drug-free breathing aid. Okay, so another way to essentially describe the product. And again, we're here on the front page with the content. And so this was done by an agency that was using our method and using our service. And so they shared the results of this last year. And so they started the campaign, I think, in August, right? And so by month 2, they were already getting 11,000 visitors through to their site. And this is visitors that will keep coming for the long term, often for years, and it's then free. Once you've put the content out, it's then free recurring traffic, okay? And so by October of last year, they had increased their sales from search to $95,000 per month, right? And that will continue for a long, long period, right? Because you can look up these searches now and you'll see that the website is still there, right? And so that's, approximately $100,000 per month after about 1 or 2 months. And a year later, they're ranking for all these really cool terms like Air Physio where to buy, right? Where can I buy Air Physio? These really targeted terms that drives high amount of sales. It's not like when you have an ad on social media that it needs to be seen by thousands of people. Often, like if 10 people come to the site, 1 or 2 people will buy because they're looking for that exact thing. And so how did this turn out? They continued to do these articles on a regular basis, to do this content, putting them out as videos, right, as infographics, as articles, right, getting it in Google News, just in all sorts of different places. And so you can see here, so back in October last year, when they had grown their sales to almost $100,000, this was where their traffic had got to, which was about kind of a 10x from where they were, from maybe like 1,000 visitors a month to 10,000 overall. This is just showing the organic traffic from a third-party site, so it's not 100% accurate, but you can see the trend that it's now something like 10x or 20x where it was before. So essentially this has then driven millions of dollars in sales for that company. And in total, the amount of content they put out was about 110 topics, right? But they followed the plan, they did it consistently exactly how you should do it. And so to kind of look at it from the perspective of the customer journey, right? So one thing which I've searched for before, right, is liposomal vitamin C without magnesium stearate, right? Because apparently magnesium stearate was something that I shouldn't have in my vitamins. I wanted the vitamin C to be a certain type, which was liposomal. So this is something which I've searched for. And I might look for this in Google search. I might be looking up just say vitamin C and learning about it in a podcast. Could be on YouTube. Some people looking on Pinterest, right? Or slideshow sites, or it can show up in your Google News feed, like in the Discovery feed and stuff too, if you have those interests. So there's different ways that people can come in here. And so we publish content to try and maximize where they might find us. And then essentially they do that search, like I did, and you would find an article which could be something like where to buy liposomal vitamin C without magnesium stearate. And what's cool is it's not on your website, it's on a third-party website. So for example, like Fox 28 or some other website, but it's not your website, it's someone else saying, right, that your site is the place to go get that. So it tends to have a little bit more trust, okay? And then you just send them through to your buy page, your product page, info page, sign up page, whatever you want to. And that's how the whole process works. And this can be incredibly powerful, right? So, we've seen results where we own every single listing on the front page for these long tail terms. So this is for a local business, so it's a soundproofing company in Western Canada, and they've got the number 1, the number 2 with a video, number 3 is their website, then they've got the number 4, the number 5, the number 6, the number 7, and so on, right? And then they've got stuff on page 2, and then pretty much every term you look for relating to soundproofing, like residential soundproofing, commercial acoustic management in Vancouver and so on, they show up and they are present. So bringing it back, I talked about the 80-20 rule. So with 3 to 4 hours of putting this content plan together, you can then have it, give it to a writer, give it to us, give it to whoever to then go publish that content in as many places as possible. You're avoiding competition because you're looking for and researching topics that your competitors have overlooked. And the content, when you look at it, is relatively basic, relatively boring, relatively factual and straightforward, basically saying this is a product which has this and does this. Okay, so you don't have to be an amazing copywriter to do this. Just the fact that it answers the query is enough to get people to click through to your website where you can then close the sale. Okay?